We're fine-tuning the suspension on our FL5 Civic. Let's have a look to see what parts we got to fit. So as some of you may be aware, our FL5 Civic has already been to Nitron to have a coilover set developed for it. That was a more of a road-going kit as opposed to some of the more track-focused stuff Nitron were used to producing. But after having some miles on the car now, we can tell that it's working very, very well. I was at the track yesterday as well and managed to get the car into a few high-speed corners and really feel the grip that's now been applied through the new coilovers. Progressing on from that, we want to develop the suspension that little bit further, so dialing in a little bit camber now, maybe making it feel a little bit more precise. So we've got a few parts in the boot. We'll get those fitted and see what setup we can get into the car. Before we get into fitting of any of the parts, we're going to put the car onto the alignment ramp and see where the alignment is now sitting. Once we've got some miles onto the coilovers, they've settled into place, and to see where we start from. But the parts we're going to be fitting will be a set of rigid collars. We've got some Powerflex anti-lift kit to fit, along with anti-roll bar rubbers on the front, and also Eibach rear camber arms. They came off of one of our last FK8s. We know there's quite a few parts that are interchangeable, so those bits we can reuse again. So a quick look at the alignment then. It looks pretty good, fairly neutral already. Obviously the toe through the middle here is relatively equal. We've got a little bit of adjustment to do on the back. But camber wise, you can see that we're pretty much 2 degrees all round. You know, maybe a little bit more on the near side than it is to the offside. Front looks pretty equal. So all we're going to try and do is just induce a little bit more camber across the rear. Again, same on the front. As some of you guys may know from the FK8, we've got the pins that we can remove on the front shock absorbers, which will just naturally allow the front standard top mounts to just drop in a little bit more and, you know, naturally develop a little bit more camber on the car. So we'll start off on doing that one first, as we haven't got any adjustment on the top or on the ball joints, and then put the camber arms into the rear and see what sort of setup we can get into it. Obviously the toes adjustable as standard, so that's easy to get in or out of spec wherever we want to set it at finally. So now that we've got some base data out of the car, we can move the car back across to the 2-post ramp and start getting on with some of the fitting. So as I just mentioned about the alignment pin for the front top mounts, we've removed the pin there, and now I should effectively be able to loosen up the 14mm bolts, push the shock absorber in, and then tighten back up, inducing that little bit more camber that we're looking for. So we've got the subframe off the car now, and we can have a little bit of a look around to see some of the differences from the FK8 over to the FL5. Immediately you'll notice that on the rear section of the subframe, it's now cast rather than pressed bit of steel that the old subframe was on the FK8. Obviously that's going to help with lightness and hopefully a bit of rigidity across the platform of the FL5. We've had the subframe off to look at the lower arms. So the lower arms, we're stripping off the rear bush and the front bush as well, and that was to trial fit the Powerflex bushes. So we've been able to confirm so far that the Powerflex bushes do fit on the rear, so these will be interchangeable across onto the FL5 platform, but unfortunately the front don't. So Powerflex came back to visit us while we've got the subframe off. We've taken up some measurements of the front bush there. We've also looked at the engine mount insert, which was different from the FK8 over to the FL5. So they're currently working on some of these new products to bring to us. We'll hopefully have those delivered today, get the car fitted up, and then back onto the tracking ramp, hopefully keeping all the suspension nice and tight now. Powerflex has been back down to the workshop today and brought along a few products with them. So the small bush on the front that we were looking at, we've now got a bush fitted into there, and it fits into the subframe quite nicely. It's going to be supplied with a couple of washers, and that's to protect the edges of the bush because there's some sharp edges where the captive nut bolts in on the front lower arm, so that will be supplied in with the kit. We've also got some engine mount inserts. Now we've got varying stiffnesses of these, so we'll go through testing on seeing what's going to be good for road and what's going to be preferred for track. But we started off on one of the softer mounts on our car, but like I say, we'll run through those and get those listed on the website. Moving back to the rear bushes though, we have come across one slight issue, and that's due to the width of the FK8 mount as opposed to what was on the FL5. Now, it's only about 10mm difference, but it is enough that it's not going to fit onto the subframe. That means that Powerflex are now going to reverse engineer the FK8 kit that will then run across both cars. So whilst Powerflex were around with us this week, we were looking at the front anti-roll bar bushes to see if those would again interchange from FK8 over to FL5. Size-wise, it looks near enough there. Circumference-wise, it's good. It fits the top of the bush nicely, but unfortunately the width isn't quite as wide as what we would need for the FL5 platform. So those are going to have to be redeveloped. Moving over to the rear, I actually decided to change the rear roll bar, so let's go and have a look. So we've taken the 21mm bar that comes with the car off and fitted one of the 26mm Eibach rear anti-roll bars. We've previously used this bar, so sort of semi-familiar with the characteristics of how it'll change the drive style of the car, so it should induce a little bit more oversteer and keep the car quite nice and stable across the rear end. So while still on the rear end, we fitted the rigid collars across the whole of the subframe around the back end here. We've also fitted some of our Dream braided brake lines all round. And then if you look across to the other side here, you might notice that this disc is just hanging out slightly. If you come around and have a look, you'll see what we've done to the brakes. So taking a look at what we've been up to on the rear brakes, like I mentioned, we've upgraded to the Dream brake lines across this side of the car already. We've still got the near side to do, and we fitted a set of the two-piece Paragon discs. These are a extended disc, so they come with a new carrier here as well, and they go up to a 350mm disc now, so that's going to give us a lot more anchorage over the rear end braking. So moving back over to the front end and not forgetting our front brake setup. We've got a big brake kit going onto the front of the car as well, and that's going to be using an AP9660 caliper. We've also got a two-piece disc going onto the car. That's going to be 380mm in diameter, so a massive improvement over the front brakes and will give us a lot more leverage in the braking forces on the car. We've of course already fitted the Dream braided brake lines on the car as well, so can't wait for all this to come together and start showing you guys how it then performs. If you haven't already, think about hitting the subscribe button. So there's a lot of modifications happened to the FL5 this week, but we've still got a lot more to come. We haven't yet touched on what wheels and tyres we're going to be using, and we've got a couple other little surprises in store. We're still yet to dyno the Pipercross intake, so again we'll get that done before any of the other power modifications then happen to the car, but it's really looking exciting. It's all kind of coming together real nicely. So join us for part 2 of next week's video. We will see this all come together. It'll be back on the alignment ramp. We'll get some dyno runs done and get ourselves ready to head over to the Nürburgring. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, give the video a like, and please leave us a comment below.